Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to another edition of Energy Frontiers. I am Omono Okonkwo. These are some of the biggest headlines across the African energy industry at this time. Africa is suffering, choking, and is in serious financial distress for what it didn't cause. There must be a greater sense of urgency, not in talking, but in doing and delivering resources that the continent needs very desperately. These were the words of the African Development Bank Group President, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, as he called for urgent action to raise funding for countries most vulnerable to the global climate crisis during the second ministerial meeting on climate and development at the United Nations General Assembly. In the 2022 African Economic Outlook released by the AFDB, it was stated that Africa is bearing a disproportionately high burden as one of the regions of the world most vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. This stems from low socioeconomic development, where a lack of resources increases the future risk of not meeting sustainable development objectives. The Ugandan Parliament has dismissed a resolution by the European Parliament to halt the development of the country's oil sector. The Ugandan Parliament accused the European Parliament of economic racism. Tunisia has said it is increasing cooking gas cylinder prices by 14% and fuel prices by 3%. As part of plans to reduce energy subsidies, cooking gas will now cost 8.8 dinar from 7.75 dinar for the first time in 12 years. The United States of America has pledged $5 million in support of the fight against methane emissions in Africa. The funding is being provided to the Climate Change Fund for Africa, administered by the AFDB. An agreement has been signed between Ugandan company Up Energy and My Climate Foundation to implement a 10-year project to distribute environmentally friendly cooking stoves to households in Malawi. Redefined Properties has successfully completed an $84.8 million green bond supported by the International Finance Corporation. The deal increases the availability of finance to stimulate the South African green building markets. Africa Oil Week and Leaning Energy have released a power list featuring 50 African women in the energy industry who are working for the greater good and inspiring others across the African energy sector. This week, the Ugandan Parliament hit back at the European Parliament for calling for a halt in the construction of the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, also known as EACOP, citing violations of human rights. Is the pipeline violating any rights in Uganda? That's your quick chat for the week. This is Energy Frontiers. Welcome back to the program. Elison Karuhanga is an energy law expert and a partner at Uganda-based Kampala Associated Advocates. He spoke to me about the East African Crude Oil Pipeline Law that was passed in 2021. Let's find out if rights are being violated as a result of this pipeline construction. To start us off, can you give a brief breakdown of the East African Crude Oil Pipeline Law that was passed in 2021?
In 2021, Uganda passed the EACOP, East African Crude Oil Pipeline Special Provisions Act. The Act brought into law a number of things. One, it enshrined the rights of landowners. Two, it domesticated and introduced many of the treaty provisions. In order to build the pipeline, Uganda had entered into a treaty with Tanzania, an intergovernment agreement. Uganda and Tanzania had also entered into separate host government agreements with the developers, with the project developers. And so it was agreed that many of the provisions of those agreements would be incorporated within a law, together with issues to do with land rights and together with the resolution of many of the controversial issues that may surround the project. So the ECOP Special Provisions Act seems to do with even tax harmonization between Uganda and Tanzania. So the ECOP Special Provisions Act of 2021 was therefore a law brought in to bring harmony to the process of building and constructing the East African crude oil pipeline, and also to bring harmony between the provisions of the laws in Uganda and Tanzania. Tanzania also passed a similar act in Tanzania. Therefore, we have a treaty with Tanzania, and the Tanzanian and Ugandan governments have agreements with developers to develop this project, and both of us have been able to domesticate our treaties and at the same time have proper agreements in place and governed by a proper legal framework.
So, why is this pipeline a critical project?
The East African crude oil pipeline is a critical project for Uganda because it opens up the Ugandan oil fields. Uganda discovered oil some 1,400 kilometers away from the nearest coastline, in a place which at that time was a very remote area, along the Albertine Graben, near the border with the Congo, and all the way from the western part of the country to the northern part of the country. And as these oil fields began to stretch along the country, very many rural areas, a lot of infrastructure had to be created. One of the things that has to be created for the commercialization of this oil is the East African crude oil pipeline. This pipeline will be able to take Uganda's crude oil to international markets. Uganda will also be building a refinery. Uganda currently consumes 30,000 barrels of oil per day. The refinery's capacity will be 60,000 barrels of oil per day, targeting Uganda and parts of the East African region as its market. However, the oil we'll be producing is 250,000 barrels per day. There will therefore be excess oil, and a lot more oil will have to be exported as crude because it cannot be utilized within the region. And ECOP therefore allows for the commercialization of the oil fields and the commercialization of a refinery and the commercialization of the entire Uganda oil project. The second important value of ECOP is that it opens a second route to the sea for Uganda. Uganda mainly relies on the route towards the east with Kenya. With a new port at Tanga that has been built, with a pipeline that will be connecting us to the port in Tanga, we have not just a new route to the sea, but a massive opportunity for a reverse gas pipeline from Tanzania to help power up the Ugandan industry. Not only is that an advantage, we also have an incredible opportunity to create a trade route which didn't exist before. Already, I think a study by the African Development Bank is being undertaken and has established that there are a number of new businesses that have risen up just along the pipeline corridor. So we are creating a new trade route, we are creating a new economic center in this country. 80% of our GDP is located in our capital. We are right now creating a new business place. There's an industrial park that's coming up. Already international airport is being constructed and is 70% complete within the oil region. We are seeing an opportunity. The East African crude oil pipeline is important because it helps to commercialize an incredible opportunity for the people of Uganda and for the people of East Africa. It's important for East Africa because we should still use the port of Mombasa to mainly import a lot of the product and a lot of the substance, a lot of the equipment for the construction of ECOP. So ECOP would rely entirely on the Kenyan port of Mombasa. The oil would rely entirely on the Tanzanian port of Tanga. And therefore, this is an East African project in the sense that it cannot work without Kenya, it cannot work without Tanzania, and it creates a new route, a new trade route, incredible opportunities from Mombasa to Tanga. And so it is an important project in that regard.
Welcome back to Energy Frontiers. Let's track the prices of some energy products. Early on Friday, September the 23rd, the London Brent crude was trading a negative 0.46% at 90.04 USD per barrel, while the US WTI was trading down 0.35% at 83.50 USD per barrel. Natural gas was trading a positive 2.16% at 7.24 USD per MMBTU, also in early Friday trade. This week, a gallon of gasoline in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, cost 185 Ethiopian birr. A gallon of gasoline in Libreville, Gabon, cost 2,290 CFA francs. And that is the package for this edition of Your Energy Frontiers, and we thank you for watching. Remember to follow the show on Frontier Africa Reports website and across all our social media handles, as indicated on the screen. It is goodbye from me, Omono Okonkwo, and I will see you next time.